Hey out there, legal warriors. How can an investigator help your criminal case? What I mean is that an investigator that is hired on the defense side to help a client with their criminal matter. If you're interested in that area of the law, if you watch a lot of cop shows, stuff like that, stay tuned because this is the video for you. My name is Attorney Lance Fryrear, and I'm a defense attorney in Linwood, Washington. My law firm has been defending people charged with crimes for more than 20 years, and I'm putting out these videos to help educate the public. So if you find this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people will get the help they need. Now I'm just going to jump right into it. Investigators. What do I mean by that? Well, the police department have police officers, and those are pretty much investigators for the state, aren't they? They have police powers, they have arrest powers, stuff like that. But what about the defense side? Can the defense hire their own private investigator to help in a case? And the answer is yes. Yes, they can. When I say private investigator, I don't necessarily mean someone like you see on TV and the police shows where they're sitting outside tailing someone or stuff like that. I'm talking more about a specialist who is trained in how to interview people and to analyze facts, F-A-C-T-S, I'm not always the best with that word, and also to gather facts, right? And in certain types of cases, investigators can be pretty helpful. In certain types of cases, would probably be overkill. So what does an investigator do? Well, an investigator is a non-attorney who likely is going to look at all of the police reports, look at all of the evidence from a different point of view, from a non-attorney point of view, just from sort of a building the story point of view. And us attorneys, we have a lot going on, okay? We are thinking about strategies and ways to resolve cases outside of the fact pattern, right? Because when you rely too heavily on the fact pattern, so does the prosecutor. And their fact pattern is in the police report. And guess what? It's bad for the defendant, okay? And so it's sort of not what you do first necessarily is try to develop better facts, at least in my opinion as an attorney. So having an investigator who's only worried about that can be pretty helpful because they can see things that maybe attorneys might miss, all right? And there's plenty of good both men and women investigators out there, and they all have different styles and strengths, but what they're mainly doing is looking at the facts, analyzing the facts, and then also trying to see how they can clarify and develop more facts. So what do? Well, typically they're going to interview witnesses. Okay, they might interview witnesses for our side because, again, they're professionals. They can try to ask the right questions and go out in person and talk to the witnesses on your side, right? Maybe there's some witnesses on your side, and we want to get recorded what they remember, while they still remember it. They may not remember it a year from now. So it's important to get some of that stuff recorded. And again, it's far less expensive and probably far more effective to have an investigator go do that than have an attorney go do that. What else might the investigator do? Well, the investigators, if a case proceeds towards trial, they're going to have a chance to go with the attorney typically to interview alleged victims, face to face, maybe with the prosecutor. They're going to have a chance to interview other adverse witnesses, sometimes with the attorney, sometimes without, and try to actually find out all the details that might help us, because the police officer just usually did their best job, but did a quick job of writing down stuff that might be helpful to them. They don't always write down stuff that's going to help the defendant, right? It'd be nice if they did, but that's not what I find. So an investigator can be really helpful in trying to pull out helpful facts from adverse witnesses while also trying to get the full story and helpful facts from witnesses on our side. So what's a good reason to have an investigator do that and not an attorney? Well, if an investigator gets someone to tell them something like, let's say something simple, the light was green, okay, it's a reckless driving case, let's imagine, and the cop says it's a red light, and the investigator finds an independent witness that says the light was green. Well, the investigator writes that down. The investigator has asked the person that question, the witness, and now later on the stand in a trial, that person says, no, the light was red, or I'm not sure. Well, then the attorney can call that investigator to the stand to impeach them and say, hey, isn't it so that this witness said the light was green when you talked to them 3 months ago. Well, yeah, that's the case. Well, if us attorneys interviewed that witness, we're not allowed to put ourselves on the stand to testify because we are a party to the action. We're representing a party, and we cannot testify while also being an attorney. That is not allowed. So that's why an investigator is useful to sort of be able to hold a witness to their story later should their story change. And stories change for all types of reasons. One is simply bad memory. Sometimes it's actual trying to affect outcomes in a way that's less than honest, right? But that's one of the best textbook reasons, the law school textbook reasons, to have an investigator do the interviewing. Besides, they're just going to do a better job than the attorney if we have a good investigator. That's my guess. What else do we have to worry about? Well, what type of cases should we have an investigator in? Lance, do you have an investigator in every case? Absolutely not, right? Investigators are best used, I think, in more serious cases, felony cases, or cases that are more likely to get to trial because they're expensive, right? They're going to cost the client money. Most cases are going to resolve, hopefully favorably for a client if things are going well, without having to get really deep into the fact pattern. Usually there's not a huge disagreement about what happened. It's about what should happen now that we're in court. And if we do things in a way that's therapeutic and helpful and responsible, oftentimes we can get a decent result without having to get deeply in the facts. Now, if we've got a case that's going to go to trial that has a huge factual dispute, right, then it's more likely we need an investigator. If we have a case, a major felony case, where there's major penalties, we're talking years in prison, well, we're going to have an investigator if it gets to a trial, because we need that person to do the interviewing of the witnesses, and we're going to need them to testify if witnesses start changing their story, right? So, while an attorney can do it themselves, and sometimes we're forced to in certain situations, it's best that we have the investigator do that. So what type of cases? High fact dispute cases where there's likely a trial, or cases with major penalties where we have to make sure that since we think it's probably going to not be settled, that we've done things as best as we can. So who can be an investigator? Well, you have to go through training, right? You have to become licensed in the state, and so and there's going to be background checks and requirements, but for the most part, anyone who puts in the work, right, can be an investigator. And some law firms have investigators on staff, public defenders do, just due to the sheer number of cases, and most law firms will hire a particular investigator based upon the type of case involved, right? If it's a financial case, well, we'd be hiring an investigator that has more experience and training in the financial area. Maybe they've got an accounting background, right? If it's a major felony case, maybe we're hiring an investigator that has more experience with major felonies. Certain types of cases, a male or a female investigator may be better. They're a huge asset to have. So if you're an investigator, thank you for all the work you do. You've always been a great help to us. So hopefully that explains to you a little bit of what investigators do, why they're important, and why we don't have one in every case. Again, just sometimes that would be overkill. If you have a serious case, definitely talk to your attorney about if it makes sense to hire an investigator and when it makes sense to, because sometimes you don't want to do it too early. There's lots of reasons for that, because sometimes an investigator going out and beating the bushes, talking to witnesses, might make adverse witnesses more interested in the case, and sometimes we don't want them really interested in the case if they're against the client. So if you found this useful, please like and please subscribe, and more importantly, if you have a legal problem, a criminal problem, feel free to give my office a call. We've been doing this more than 20 years. We'll listen to what happened, we will identify a way forward, and we will be there for you. Thank you.